So I want to make a video talking about why I think the too cute, xenogender type inclusionist ideology results in more detransitioners. Now, I'd like to go into this stating this is not a statistical fact. As far as I'm aware, there have been no studies or surveys on this. This is my perspective, and though I will be linking sources to prove that gender is not a social construct and is, in fact, neurology, this is my take on something, and I would like to make that very clear. First of all, I want to say, regardless of if a detransitioner held a xenogender or too cute ideology, I do not have any ill will towards them. If anything, I feel bad for them because, in my opinion, they are a victim of this ideology. And regardless of how I feel about their social politics, I don't think anyone should have to go through the pain of everything that comes along with being a detransitioner, whether that's just medical or social. Now, it is a fact that brains are gendered and that fetal development and hormonal levels in the womb and stuff like that, as well as neurology, contribute and are basically the reason that people are trans. Again, I'll be linking sources to this in the description. So I'm not going to go into reading those studies here or anything. I have done that before. I'll link the video where I do it. And again, I will be linking the sources. But if you don't believe me on that, I want you to go read those sources and watch those videos first before arguing with me on it, because that is the position we're taking in this video, as it is the scientifically grounded one. Now, I don't think it's any secret to anyone on either side of the argument that inclusionists do not like trans med slash truscum being allowed to share their opinions. That silencing us, regardless if that's through changing our mind or just making us lose our platform, that is generally a goal that a lot of them seek to accomplish. Now, I don't like Calvin Gara, but Calvin Gara was essentially chased off the internet. The xenogender cringe sub was mass reported and banned. Personally, I've had multiple TikToks mass reported and banned for being trans med. People get harassed, mass reported, etc. constantly because inclusionists don't want these ideas out there. And that means that the prevailing ideology coming from the trans community, both from within it and to the outside, is a few things. One, gender is purely a social construct. This is a scientific falsehood, but it is what they are presenting. Being trans is a feeling. Being trans is the result of emotions, thoughts, or dissatisfaction with the way that you appear. The last one, they may argue on because they like to go the whole being trans doesn't have to be a miserable thing, but that's generally what it's getting at. And while the neurology and development that lead to being trans can produce these things, this is not fundamentally what makes someone trans. Transness is not a feeling. And when these two things put together are the main narrative being pushed by, I was going to say a vocal minority, really a vocal 50-50. When that's the main thing being pushed, that is what people who may be questioning their gender hear. I'd like to insert here, there's nothing wrong with questioning your gender, whether you come to the conclusion that you're trans or cis. Regardless, I just want to put that in there. But this idea that gender is purely social leads a lot of gender nonconforming people to think that they're trans, because the definition of transness that is generally pushed is an incorrect one, and one that can encompass gender nonconforming people. Now, this isn't to say that trans people can't be gender nonconforming or androgynous or whatever, but it's to say that some people who are cis and will later come to realize they're cis, detransitioners, are often gender nonconforming individuals who hear the idea that gender is a social construct and then run with it and go, oh, well, I was born a girl, but I hate having long hair. Wearing skirts makes me feel uncomfortable, all of these things, because that's just not something they like to wear. They're gender nonconforming. And when they hear transness is a feeling, and those things are feelings, whenever they hear gender is a social construct, gender doesn't exist, that can lead them to believe that they're trans. And again, I don't have any ill will towards these people. I think they're victims of this mentality. I want to once again make that very clear. And I think this results in two things. Well, obviously it can result in a lot of things, but two things I want to point out. One, again, detransitioners, mainly people who start to medically transition, usually starting hormones, and then proceed to get the dysphoria they didn't have before and realize they're not trans because their definition of trans wasn't discomfort with the body that you were born in being the incorrect gender, whether you want to call that dysphoria or incongruence or whatever. But I don't feel like the gender norms fit me, so I must be trans. And what a lot of people, I'm not really sure if this is how you actually say it because it sounds too much like transistors, but transistors or something like that. I don't know. I'll put the word on the screen. I don't really know how to say this word. Basically, trans people who think you do not need to transition in any way, shape, or form to be trans. Now, I'm not talking about medical transitioning. Medical transitioning is a very personal thing that I think is up to you and your doctors. And I'm not going to make a judgment on what someone does or doesn't decide to do in terms of medical transitioning. But what I mean by that is people who change absolutely nothing, no name, no pronouns, no appearance, no haircut, no anything. And again, while you can be gender nonconforming and be trans, I'm talking about people who literally do absolutely nothing but say, I am trans, and that is it, and have no desire to even socially transition. And again, that is almost exclusively, or maybe I would dare to say exclusively, done by inclusionists, tucutes, those types of people, because they don't think gender is real. They think it's social. They think it's made up, and that by that logic, there's no reason that you should need to feel any level of discomfort with your birth gender to be trans. And I will say that's probably not how they would word it, but the actions speak louder than words, and that is what it is portraying. Now, the problem with creating more detransitioners does two things. One is it causes harm to that individual. I'll link a video, or maybe if I can find more than just the one I'm thinking of off the top of my head, of some detransitioners talking about what they go through. It is not a fun experience. It's emotionally draining. It is essentially having to admit that being trans was a phase. And I'm not saying being trans was a phase for detransitioners or real trans people, but that's how it will come across to people, as well as anyone who did start to medically transition now have to go back and do that. I've heard of detransitioned women who thought they were men who have to get vocal cord surgery to get their voice back to where it was before. Because, little personal thing here, I was on testosterone for about 3 years doing the shot, and I had to go off of it because of my health. I couldn't keep up with the consistency of taking a shot, and I was off testosterone for about a year, and my voice did get higher, but it never went to how it was before, which I was grateful for because I did eventually end up going back on testosterone once learning you could do a cream, but your voice does not go back to how it was before. So a lot of women who detransition have to deal with that. Or men who thought they were trans women who may have started hormones and now may have breasts and need to go get surgery if they are discomforted with that. And even if it's just social, again, like I said, it results in the embarrassment, the shame, the confusion of having to socially detransition. And regardless of what parts of that apply to them or what parts don't, it's not a pleasant process for anyone. And the idea that being gender being a social construct is creating more of that. Now, I'm not saying it's solely the purpose, the not the purpose. It's not solely the cause of that, but it's contributing. At least to me, I feel like it is contributing. And I don't see why we should let that slide, just because it's not the sole reason. And there's also a lesser issue here of conservatives using detransitioners to point and go, look, it's just a kid. Kids are just, this is just kids these days. They're confused. They're doing this, they're doing that. Look, they're not really the other gender. It's fuel for them. And now this is no fault of the detransitioners or even the two cutes, but it is unnecessary fuel that doesn't need to be there. Because the only thing I agree with that two cutes will ever say is cis people are going to be transphobic regardless of how the trans community presents itself. And I do think that's true. But it's still unnecessary fuel for them. It's still creating more than needs to be there for absolutely no reason. That's really the main crux of my argument. This is a shorter video, but I do just want to make it clear by the end that I know that this is not the sole cause of people detransitioning. People think they're trans incorrectly for a lot of reasons. For trauma, for the people they surround themselves with, for countless reasons, or body dysmorphia being mistaken for dysphoria, lots of things. There are lots of things that contribute to people thinking they're trans when they're not. But this is one of them. And I think it often goes overlooked. I don't even really see people on my own side of the argument talking about this a lot. And I think it's something that needs to be mentioned because it is going to create more confusion. And that's what goes with spreading misinformation. When you spread misinformation, people act on that misinformation. That misinformation in this case being that gender is purely a social construct. And people are going to hear that and they're going to act on that information. And I don't really think it's entirely their fault whenever they're not the type of inclusionist, too cute, whatever, that likes to shut down conversation. They just do their thing. And it's not their fault, and it's not a detransitioner's fault that they fell for the loudest ideology because ours is being suppressed. But it's still a problem. And it doesn't, and it's still showing that xenogenders, that non-dysphorics, and that this ideology as a whole is doing no favor to trans individuals, people questioning their gender, detransitioners, or anyone who has anything to do with transness. Thanks for watching, guys. Hada bra.
I stare at the populace